record button. All right. So welcome everybody to our first orientation session. We're going to start by, I'm going to share my screen with everybody. So this is just my welcome screen. And we're going to start today with how do you unmute the microphone? So Molly, you should be able to see a screen, I believe. And on that, you should see, sorry, my screen keeps jumping around. There should be a microphone button to the side, and that is, or on the bottom, and it says mute or unmute. I'm hoping that works for you. If not, I may have to have you just type in the chat box. Okay, so I'm going to figure out the whole webinar system, but let's go ahead and get started today. Sorry, okay. So we're gonna start this session today with an introduction to the 4-H, this is what we call the 4-H PRKC. It's our professional knowledge, research knowledge, and competencies. So the reason I want to start with this today is I would like to, sorry, I'm keeping an eye on the chat box as well. So what I want to do is tell you kind of how it was come about deciding on what topics for the orientation. What this is our competencies that are led to believe, or that are research-based, that all 4-H professionals should have an understanding of. So I'm going to also let you know that you're not going to have there are 256 competencies, and you're not going to have all 256. Not even going to probably have 200 of those. But I just want you to be aware of the areas and the topics. So what is it? It's our framework that's used to guide our 4-H, to guide our professional development efforts. And just as we strive to make our 4-Hers, to make the best better with our 4-Hers, we also do the same thing as 4-H professionals. It's our job to make ourselves better in our profession, and so that's why we look at the PRKC. Now, kind of a history of the PRKC. In 1985, it was introduced by our National Association of Extension 4-H agents. By the Professional Development Committee. So they started working on this in probably 83, 84. It was started out as a research project, and it started out, and it was called the 4-H PRK, so the Professional Research and Knowledge. In 2004, it was reintroduced by NAE 4HA again as the 4-H PRKC, to not only include the research and knowledge that's needed, but also those competencies that help us to be able to conduct our programs. And I will let you know that right now in 2015, 2016, it is currently being reviewed and revised. I know that very well because I am one of the national chairs who is working on that revision. We currently have 5 of the 6 domains, and you'll understand what that means in just a moment. We currently have 5 of the 6 domains completed or pretty close to being completed. The 6th domain will be completed soon. So you will see a rollout of that in the next, probably by early winter would be my guess. But essentially what the PRKC, it's made up of 6 domains. Of those 6 domains, the topics are youth development, youth program development, volunteerism, equity, access, and opportunity, partnerships, and organizational systems. And this is what is currently in place. This is not the revisions that are being made. I will let you know that there will still be 6 domains, but those name changes might be slight slightly different. But this just kind of explains to you what those are. So those are: youth development is understanding how young people learn and grow. And youth program development, and actually I'm just going to move to that one. So essentially that is understanding and how to apply youth development principles are our cornerstone to the program. If we have a well-intentioned but uninformed youth workforce, then we may have an issue with developing inappropriate activities. So things like developmental levels is extremely important. Looking at, and that's developmental levels, what's age appropriate, both physically, mentally, cognitively, emotionally, looking at all aspects of developmental levels. It's also looking at kind of what is the essential elements of 4-H, and we're going to be talking about a lot of these principles as we move through these orientation sessions. Life skill development and mastering those competencies for that youth development domain. So again, things like growth and development, youth development theory, and then the practice. We also have the youth program development domain. So this is planning, implementing, and evaluating programs that achieve our outcomes. So we may know how to work with young people, but do we know how to design and create programs effectively? So it's things like it's situational analysis. Now I know that sounds like a big word, but basically you're looking at needs assessment. What are the needs of the youth in our community? What is program design? How do we design a program that is appropriate for our young people? How do we deliver it? How do we make a program hands-on and not just lecture for our young people? And then also about evaluation. And essentially this comes down to when we have a program that is fully developed, that we make sure everything, that we're hitting our marks on everything, that is what gives 4-H our credibility and our accountability. The next one is volunteerism. So this is building and maintaining our volunteer management system, both for the delivery of our programs. We all know that we can't do this work without our volunteers, and so it's really, really important that we have our volunteers and that we understand what that means. So things like personal readiness, our organizational readiness, engagement of volunteers, the education of volunteers, and the sustainability. Every year there are more than 500,000 4-H volunteers that are committed to our organization. And so this can be things like our community club, the after-school program, our special interest, a whole variety of programs. And so we need to make sure we have the best system set up in order to maintain and retain, to recruit and retain those volunteers. The equity, access, and opportunity are interacting effectively and equitably with diverse individuals and building that long-term relationship with diverse audiences. This isn't just what we consider ethnic diversity. This is also looking at young people with special needs. This is looking at urban versus rural. This is looking at socioeconomic, looking at just the whole gamut of equity, access, and opportunity. So it's sensitivity, awareness, communication, those inclusive organizations. And it's designing programs and looking at our policies and our staffing models and community outreach so that we do reach all potential audiences. And then we have the next one is partnerships. So this is engaging youth in community development and looking at the broader community and youth development. It's youth-adult partnerships. It's talking about youth in action, our organizational alliances, community development, etc. So, we're looking at, we know it's important to build social capital and the benefits that come to young people when they are involved in their community. And so it's having those competencies in what that looks like and to building that caring and supportive community. And also, you know, getting our youth involved. This is, you know, a lot of times this is where service learning fits in. And I'm giving you the broad categories. There are actually within like youth adult partnerships, there may be 2 or 3 competencies that are important. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out the PowerPoints for everybody when I'm done at the end. And with that, I'm going to send you the PRKC so you can see those. But I just want to give you a broad overall idea of how we picked, or how the topics are picked. And then organizational systems, this is, you know, really having being able to position our organization and the people to do the best that they can do. So the things like organizational effectiveness, personal effectiveness, communication strategies, you know, resource development, risk management, professionalism. You know, there's highlights in management and interpersonal skills. One of the things that's in there is balancing your work life and your life outside of the job, being able to master those and give you a sense of professionalism. So essentially, I mean, that is a very, very quick overview of the program. But I just wanted to share it with you because if you noticed on the schedule, every one of the topics, if you go back, actually I'm going to go back to the schedule and show you what I mean by this. So if you look at this, I have the introduction to the PRKC and then the 4-H youth development domain. So what you're learning under what is a land grant, you know, the history of 4-H, the organizational structure, that all fits under that youth program development domain. That may reach one of those competencies within that area. In 2 weeks, there's going to be sessions on organizational systems domains. So you're going to be learning about the use of the name and emblem as well as managing risk. And then also the youth development domain talking about the essential elements. So that's how those topics were picked. All right, going back to, okay, anybody have any questions quickly about that, about the PRKC? I know it may seem like a weird concept, but hopefully as we move along, you'll understand it a little bit more. But essentially, that's how items are selected for professional development. All right, I'm not hearing from anybody. I was just gonna look at okay. I'm just looking to see who's on too. So we're gonna talk about what is a land-grant university. How many of you out there knows that? And we have quite a few people that have been on for a while, and then we have some brand new people. But how many of you know that University of Nevada is a land-grant university and what that means? You guys can type in the chat box if you want to. Okay. Some people have no idea what it means. Some people know what a land grant is, which is why, yep, every state has one. But why do we have one? So what a land grant college or land grant university is, it's an institution that's been designated by the state legislature or by federal legislation, actually, or Congress, to receive benefits from what's called the Morrill Act of 1862 and then the Morrill Act of 1890. The original mission, and that there's lots of federal support, and we're going to talk just briefly about some of those, but the original mission of these institutions was really set forth in the original Morrill Act, and it was to teach agriculture, military tactics, and mechanical arts, as well as the classical studies. It basically, and it was to bring university or higher education to members of the working class so that they could get a degree. Up until this point, there were really your only options of getting a degree came from Harvard or Yale or Williams and Mary or the big private institutions that were very expensive, and so really only the rich could get a degree in higher education. So there were 3 Morrill Acts. What is the Morrill Act? First of all, the Morrill Act was created by Justin Morrill, who was a representative from Vermont, and he later became a senator. And it was first introduced in 1857, and it passed in 1859, but then was vetoed by President Buchanan at that time. So in 1861, they reintroduced the land grant, or the Morrill Act. And what they did is it gave each state 30,000 acres for each senator and representative they had back in Washington, D.C. And then it also added the requirement. Originally, it didn't have the military tactics, but with the Civil War being really important at that point, they added the military tactics. But what that did is it gave them 30,000 acres. They could 30,000 acres per representative or senator. They could then sell that acreage and build their university. Many of them chose to also build their university on that 30,000 acres, or not 30,000 acres, but take part of that. It was signed into law by President Lincoln on July 2nd of 1862. So this past year, or we have been celebrating the 125th anniversary of the Morrill Act. And so what that did is, again, we created these universities. It was given that to take it to the people. In 1890, they did pass a second Morrill Act, which extended the access of this concept so it extended the access to higher education by providing additional endowments for all land grants, but prohibiting distribution of money to states that made distinctions of race and admissions. So those universities, those states that had racial segregation, or you couldn't get into the university based on your race, received separate money for a land grant university at historical Black colleges. And so you'll see those traditionally in the southern states. Because they were the segregated area, or segregated universities. And then in 1994, they passed a third Morrill Act, which gave 29 Native American colleges land grant status. And so those are considered what we consider 1894 land grants. So where are these land grant universities? Well, this is a picture of the 1862. You can see that every state has at least one. There are a variety. When you see like Texas A&M, a lot of them were A&M, they are, that A&M stands for agriculture and mechanical arts. So my question for you, to see if everybody's paying attention right now, is who knows what the first land grant university was? You can type it in the chat box if you know. Nope, it's not Penn State, not Cornell, not Texas. So the first land grant university was Michigan State University. It got its land grant status. It was actually a Michigan Agriculture College, and it was granted its land grant status first. And so if you'll find I used to work in Michigan, and my husband is from Michigan, so I'm a big Michigan State fan. So I always throw that one out. Nope, not Iowa. Iowa was home of something else first, but you can see all of those. The two closest land grant universities in the country are Washington State University and University of Idaho. They are actually only 8 miles apart. And they do share a lot of resources, especially in the agriculture when it comes to research, et cetera. Like University of Idaho houses the dairy, and they both share the dairy. And then Washington State University has the swine farm. And so University of Idaho students go to Washington State if they have questions about, or if they want to work with swine. And then again, Washington State students come over to Idaho if they want to work with dairy. So those are the two closest. We do have land grant universities in Guam, in Micronesia, in Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. So there are land grant universities. How do they pick which college got a land grant? And I do not really know. That was left up to the states to decide. Many of them actually created a land grant. They didn't already have a university. Like I know, so the University of Idaho was founded in 1890, and so that was a land grant. I'm not sure, honestly, this sounds horrible, but I don't know the history of UNR. I can look that up and get back to everybody, but many of them were created specifically for land grant status. So Texas A&M, again, was already created for land grant status, or it was created specifically for that. Good question, though. Okay, so then the 1890s, you can see where those 1890s are. They are in the South traditionally, and in fact, they're all besides Delaware and Maryland, and Delaware and Virginia or Maryland are not considered the South, but the rest of those are. Many of them do have a separate extension system. Many of them do have a separate 4-H program. I know in Oklahoma at Langston, they do have a separate extension and a separate 4-H program. They have two 4-H program directors or program leaders, one at Langston, one at Oklahoma State. The same in Texas. Prairie View has they work very closely together, but they are two separate programs. Makes it a little more difficult. And then our 1994s, again, are those tribal colleges, and most of these were already in existence, and then they were just, every one of them were granted land grant status. One of the differences with the 1994s is they receive very little federal funding. They do get a smidgen, but it's so little. When I worked in Michigan, I was actually right here. If you can see this, Bay Mills Community College was in my county. And so I worked fairly closely with them. They did not have a separate extension system. We had an extension liaison to the 4-H program, or to the extension program. And so we worked with them, not a lot, but a little bit. When I was in North Dakota, you can see all of the ones that they had in North Dakota. We worked with Turtle Mountain Community College. They did have a separate extension system. They did not have a separate 4-H program, but they had a separate extension system. And then I believe that I believe Sitting Bull might have been the other one that had a separate extension system. So we do not have any in Nevada, so we don't have to worry about working, with them at this point. I know that there has been talk about trying to get a 1994 status at some of the institutions. And then here's just the map of all of them. So you can see that there is lots of land-grant universities. So the purpose of the land grant, this was the purpose that Justin Morrill put forth when he proposed the original Morrill Act. The endowment, support, and maintenance of at least one college where the leading object shall be, without excluding other scientific and classical studies, and including military tactics, to teach such branches of learning as are related to agriculture and mechanical arts, such as the manner as legislatures of the states may respectively prescribe, in order to promote the liberal and practical education of the industrial classes in several pursuits and professions of life. That's a lot of technical language. And so land grants do not go to all colleges, even if they have military, ag, and mechanical. Yes, there is only one 1862 institution in every state that is designated. For Nevada, University of Nevada, Reno has been designated by the federal government as our land-grant university. Now there is within the state says that the land-grant status was awarded to the entire University of Nevada system of higher education. So there's debate there, but we do have a letter from federal, from USDA, that says University of Nevada, Reno is our 1862 institution. So yes, each state can only have one 1862. They may have an additional 1890 or 1994. I know so my experience in Idaho, we did have another institution. It was a private institution, a private religious college that did offer agriculture, but it was not a land-grant university, but it did offer agriculture. But in order to maintain our land-grant status, we do have to continue to teach the military, agriculture, and mechanical sciences. So along with our land grants, then came what they call the Hatch Act, and that was passed in 1887. So they saw all these great things happening at the university, and at these land-grant universities. The great things happen on campus, but we needed to get it out into the hands of the people in the state too. So in 1887, they passed the Hatch Act, which established our agricultural experiment stations. And that money appropriated under this act is used for agriculture research. We do have an ag experiment station that is part of Cabner, the College of Agriculture, Biological Science, Biotechnology, and Natural Resources. Sorry, I will get that eventually now. But you do have to, so we do have a system. We do not have very many experiment stations across the state. In many states, they actually have experiment stations that are housed in different parts of the state. I know that is one of the dean's goals. The new dean's goals is to establish those across our state. But there is funding to do research in agriculture. And what this did is the land-grant university within the Morrill Act, it also said that you had to do research within the area of agriculture, etc. And so the Hatch Act gave money to that function. And then in 1914, again, we had all this great research happening, but we couldn't get it out into the hands of the people again. So that established the cooperative extension system. So this is that cooperation between the USDA and the land-grant universities to conduct agriculture extension work, taking it out. So specifically, it's instruction and practical demonstrations, originally in agriculture and home economics, to people that weren't attending the institution. And again, that's a key component to the largest delivery system in the world, and that's our land-grant university. You know, extension is one of the largest delivery modes for these programs, for what's happening on campus. So that is a very brief discussion about what is a land grant, but I just wanted everybody to be aware that yes, they are there. Yes, they are. It is critical. Without a land grant, we cannot have extension. Without extension, we cannot have 4-H. That is really kind of the key component. If you know, if for some reason extension, you know, when they went through the big budget crisis and cut extensions funding here in Nevada, you know, that hurt the 4-H program just as much, because without extension, we can't have 4-H. Trying to explain that to a lot of our stakeholders is tough sometimes. They're like, well, we'll just do our own 4-H program. Well, you can't. It's not allowed by federal legislation through the Morrill Act and the Smith-Lieber Act. These are two websites that are really, really good about the history of the land-grant university. I had pulled up it's been a while since I've talked about this. And yes, every state does have an extension program, Molly, and so yes, but it has to be tied to the land-grant university. So, and every state has a 4-H program. But if you want more information about, you know, more details, I mean, I could have gone into a lot of details, but I chose not to today just because it can bore people at times. And so, but these are two really good websites to go to. All right. So you can see that we have got, you know, so that land-grant university is really critical to what we do within 4-H. And so I think, you know, and I want everybody to make that connection that 4-H is tied to extension, extension is tied to the land-grant university. All right, so now I'm going to give you a brief history about the 4-H program. I'm just going to open up the chat box over here again so I can see it. Okay, so this is one, and actually as I was looking, I have some history of 4-H and, you know, but I needed to update it, and so I was looking, and actually I love it because Nevada already has done this. When they celebrated the centennial in 2014, they put together the next two documents that I'm going to share with you. So this one is talking about the history of 4-H nationally. So nationally, 4-H was founded in 1902. It is the nation's largest youth development organization. There are over 6 million youth that are involved in 4-H every year across the country. And it helps our young people to gain, and their families, because we all know that 4-H is a family organization as well, but it's helped them to be proactive forces within their community. It's really opened the door to young people to help them gain leadership skills and explore ways to give back. You know, I was just talking to somebody the other day about 4-H, and my comment back is, when you ask a 4-H alumni, what's the one thing you remember from 4-H, or what's one thing that you learned in 4-H? Number one is public speaking skills, or how to get in front of a group and give a talk. Number two is how to be a leader in your community. Number three, the importance of giving back. While I think our projects are great, we also have to remember that project is not, that's just the way we're getting the young people into our organization. It's kind of the carrot. You know, we talk about shooting sports. Shooting sports is how we get them in, and then we're going to teach them those life skills: how to get in front of a group and give a demonstration, how to give back into to their community, how to be a leader. Those are really our ultimate goals. Like I said, or that steer is the carrot that we get them in, but then we want to expand beyond that. So just kind of, but that is really what our goal is. And we've been around since 1902. So in the late 1890s, 4-H programs they were called Boys and Girls Clubs. They might have been called a boys club, they might have been called a girls club. There wasn't really any one person that you can credit with starting the 4-H program, but there are ways, or throughout the system. The way we got started was, same is true today. They found that if you teach the young people in the home better ways to grow corn, they're going to then teach their parents are going to see this, and then they're going to start adopting those same practices. So it really was corn clubs and canning clubs. So they went in and they taught the young people, how to farm so they would have a higher yield, strategies for farming, and then they taught the young women how to can so they didn't have as much botulism and as much death caused to improper canning of their home goods. So in 1901, there was an Ohio school principal that promoted vocational agriculture in out-of-school clubs. So there may have been programs within the school, but these were out of school. And in 1902, they formed the first real 4-H club with boys and girls that had officers, projects, meetings, and records. So that's what started the 4-H club program. So this is just a picture of one of the first official 4-H club. And then in 1907, the first emblem was used nationally, and it was designed by O.H. Benson, and it was a 3-leaf clover, the heart, hands, and head, heart, and hands, sorry. And in 1911, he then suggested that they add hustle to be added as a 4th H and make it a 4-leaf clover. So they redesigned and revised the clover, and they adopted the new clover, as you can see. Later that year, O.B. Martin suggested instead of saying hustle, they add health. So the health was added, and that is what has been our 4-H motto, or our 4-H clover ever since, is the 4-leaf clover for head, heart, hands, and health. And I have to tell you, if your children, the other day, my son came home and he said, "Mom, for the first time I benefited from your job in school." And I was like, "Really? It's just the first time?" But he goes, "Yeah, they were playing some trivia game at school, and one of the questions was, what is the 4th H in 4-H?" And they said the first 3 are this, and Cody knew it. And so he was all proud of himself, and nobody else in the class knew it. So that, number one, told me that, we need to do some work there, but it also told me that, I was pretty proud of him for actually remembering what it was, number one, and number two, he did a little education in there. So then the second decade came about of 4-H, and in 1918, the term 4-H club was used for the first time in a federal document. And then in 1921, the National Committee on Boys and Girls Club Work was formed. So that was kind of the start of National 4-H headquarters and looking at 4-H on a national level. So after World War I, 4-H really started to focus on becoming a more organized program. That's when National 4-H Club Congress grew and expanded. And then in 1924 is when our 4-H name and emblem was patented. And we're going to talk a lot about the 4-H name and emblem in 2 weeks, but it is a patent. It is actually a federally protected emblem. It was also in 1927 when the state 4-H leaders, so state 4-H program leaders, adopted the 4-H pledge and the 4-H motto. Now, I will tell you, I noticed on this slide that this is wrong. When it was adopted in 1927, it was, I pledge my head to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, and my health to better living for my club, my community, and my country. The "and my world" was added later. And then they also adopted the 4-H motto, to make the best better. So you think about that, that's a rich, rich history that we have of that motto and that pledge. And so I think it's really important to tell our young people and our volunteers, you know, we have been saying this since 1927. You know, people across the country, millions and millions of young people have been saying this since 1927. You know, what a great thing to have. What a rich history to have. Our fourth decade started, and this is where they really wanted to start expanding our programs. But because of World War II, they had to stop expansion. Pretty much a lot of 4-H programs within the country were as with most things in our country, were halted during World War II because all of our efforts focused on the war effort. But they did establish 7 goals to help with World War II, and 3 of those dealt with producing more food. So nationally we had young people working on producing more food. And then at the end of 1942, they had enrolled 650,000 new members. So that's a huge accomplishment when you think about it within our program. Right now, within a 5-year span, or 10-year span, they hope to get to have at least 1 million new members. But think about back in 1942 to have 650, that's a lot. Oops. Sorry, I lost my mouse there for a second. Okay, so in 1943, 4-H reached a peak of 1.6 million youth. In 1945, about 76% of young people completed their projects, and they really, at this point, is when they started campaigns to collect essential elements during the wartime. Not only did they want to help, they wanted to help their communities with the war effort. So it was also, during this time they collected, they might have collected iron, or they, produced more food. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that when I talk about Nevada history, but, and then when we started our 7th decade, or, 7th decade doesn't go really from 1932 to 1972, but essentially, this is, I skipped the 6th decade. So there were programs started in Asia, Europe, and Latin America, 4-H programs. And this was in 1959, President Eisenhower dedicated the National 4-H Center that is still housed in Chevy Chase, Maryland. If you ever get a chance, please, please, please go to an event at the National 4-H Center. It is amazing, an amazing place. And there still are programs in Asia, Europe, and Latin America, 4-H programs. I know one of my 4-Hers in Idaho went on a summer program. He went down to Jamaica for the summer to work and learn about Jamaican 4-H. He was there for, almost 2 months. And so he got a great history there, and learned a lot about things that happen in other countries. Extension Committee on Organization and the 4-H Subcommittee during this kind of 7th decade agreed that encouraging the participation of minorities at our national events. And then in Chicago, so the National 4-H Club Congress, which is now called National 4-H Congress, traditionally had been held in Chicago until the early 90s. From its inception to the early 90s, had been held in Chicago, and it was an awards trip. So J.C. Penney may have sponsored at that time one 4-H'er from every state to come to Chicago, and in, say, clothing design or clothing and textiles or sewing or something, the way was paid, and it was a big awards trip. But they did also put in a national workshop kind of during this time frame designed for disadvantaged youth. Excuse me. And they wanted to expand that rural and urban, they expanded that in 1966. In 1973, the national pledge was changed to add the words "and my world." And we just learned the other day, and I'm sure Karen knows this, but Pete Olson, who is a county commissioner in Churchill County, was back in Washington, D.C. as one of the youth who helped make that change and added that "and my world" to the pledge. And so that's kind of a unique, we're working on a big story about that and really highlighting him. But membership grew to 7 million youth in 1974. This is a postage stamp that was put out around that. I was thinking actually that postage stamp was actually back in the 50s, but I could be wrong. It might have been in the 70s. I actually, if you ever go to like a flea market or see where they have stamps, I have found these stamps in just buckets of, my son loves stamps, and so we buy like a big box of stamps, and we have found them in those. And so I've got a couple of them framed, and it's kind of a neat way to do things, a great memento of our history. So in about the 1980s to 1992, 4-H really started exploring new technology. This is where there was a major focus on national extension initiatives. They did a study in 1985 of 4-H alumni to find out what is that long-term impact. And so essentially, what they concluded from that was 4-H will have that impact for decades. And so, a lot of the things that we talk about, the public speaking, the all of those things are pieces that we have found that have an impact on our kids. And then last, in 4-H today, we know that it wasn't born overnight. It's been created over years. What's really neat is what 4-H started, how 4-H started by bringing communities together and bringing young people together is still our mission today. It may look differently than it looked in 1902, but it is still, that's still our mission. And so I just, it's kind of nice to see that history. I think it's important. Sorry you can't read these very well, but here are some websites about some history. The other really nice thing that's happening right now is on the federal level, they're doing a national historical mapping project. And so every state has been encouraged to submit historical events that have happened over, and historical things that have occurred within their state. And Nevada has now, we have posted, I believe, 3 of those, or at least 2 for sure, and we're working on the 3rd one, are the 4-H camp is listed under that, and our Governor Sandoval, is a 4-H alumni, and then also Pete Olson is another one that we want to recognize for his work at the national level. And so, that's kind of fun to go back and to look at that website. And I will get that sent out to everybody in my next updates that I do. And so that way people can go on and see what those. All right, any questions about the federal history or kind of the general overall history of 4-H? All right, everybody, is everybody still there? All right, good. Every once in a while, I got to ask those questions. Is everybody still here? Because I know I fall asleep sometimes. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the history of Nevada. And again, this was the one that worried me the most because I was like, gosh, I don't have this put together and I don't know, and then I was like, oh, yay, they already did it for me. So thank you to whoever put it together before me. And we probably need to add some things to it. Okay. I just want to pull up the chat box so I can see that whatever, if anybody has any questions. But essentially, so again, 4-H started in, with the Smith-Lever Act it became formalized. We had 4-H before that, but in 1914, the Smith-Lever Act is what established our federal, state, and county partners through our land-grant universities. Mission was to diffuse useful and practical information in agriculture and home economics. And one of the things that I just want to share with you, so in Idaho, how they started with extension was, if you remember back when they used to take the trains, the presidential candidates would take a train across the country and stop at various sites and do their campaigning. Well, they did the same thing with extension. The extension educator was on the back of the train, or the extension agent was on the back of the train, and they would stop in every town and do a 1-hour educational program about something that was happening. And so I think that that's kind of a fun little history about some of, extension across the country. But in Nevada, our first employee was 1914, Norma Davis. She began homemaking and 4-H youth programs. And what I find really interesting is we were looking it up, and it looks like she was in the Reno, Yerington, Douglas, Carson City area. We thought maybe she had started in Churchill, but we could not find that information. But she put in over 6,000 miles her first year. In 1914, she drove over 6,000 miles. Imagine that in cars those days. I know when I started and I did a tour of the state and visited all of the counties, and I think I put on about 2,500 miles in that 2-week period. And man, in my nice, kind of not luxury car, but my nice car of today with power steering, power brakes, all of the bells and whistles, a radio. I can't imagine putting in 6,000 miles in 1914. But what a great thing what a great legacy to leave too. She must have done some amazing programs. And we also, so there was an Elko agent, Mark Menke, and his brother Blaine. So they had exhibited blue ribbon poultry at the first state fair that was held in Fallon in 1914 as well. So that's one of our 4-Hers that went on to become an extension professional. And then the first set of yearly reports, or what we call the ES 237, our federal report, was recorded in 1915, and at that time there were 829 4-H members, and 169 of those completed their projects. So if you remember me talking about at the federal level, about the same time, maybe a little bit later, they had about 76% completion rate. We didn't quite have that, but still, 829. I think now we have, oh gosh, and you'll actually hear what number we have, about 54,000 youth that are in 4-H. So in 1916, the four-leaf clover was well known. It was getting to be known across the state. And we had ag agents and home demonstrators that worked in Lyon, Washoe, Elko, Douglas, and Clark counties This is just an example of one of their flyers that they would send out. This was one to promote 4-H, trying to get more 4-H members, it looks like. And the first ag agent in the north was Joe Wilson. He served central and northern Nevada until 1946. And you can see, you know, he conducted programs with sheep and horses and cattle throughout the West. And then the first ag agent in the South was Carl Vinson, and he really focused on horticulture. And I kind of laugh because now if you go down to Clark County, what is a lot of the focus is horticulture. And, you know, in the North, it's still quite a few animals. And then 4-H during World War I, there were 9 counties. And just to kind of let you know, if you're not familiar with the history, so when Extension began, we had ag agents, we had home demonstrators, and then eventually there became 4-H program assistants. And if you did a really, really good job, you might get promoted to be an ag agent. So there was a class system within our organization, and ag agents were always on top, and then home demonstrators, and then 4-H. We've been working really, 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 really hard in the last 20 years to eliminate that. Whether it happens, you know, I don't know, but you can see there were 9 counties during World War I in Nevada that we had agents, or that we had people working, and their emphasis was on increasing food production. Again, you know, our young people were growing fresh fruits and vegetables for canning and to help improve the health at home. So even back during World War I, we were really promoting healthy living programs. It was also, you know, what I find interesting is during World War I, Extension was able to reach 1 out of every 5 people in Nevada with youth or livestock programs and education, you know, for the home. But wouldn't it be great today if we could reach 1 out of every 5 people in the state? I think that would be, you know, fantastic. In 1919, there was a formalization of a partnership with the Nevada Farm Bureau through state legislation, and that's where our 1 mil tax was adopted, and that's typically how Extension is funded in the state of Nevada. So that partnership was formalized in 1919. So 4-H during the 20s, the program soared. This is when Extension started going into the schools and doing programs in the schools. At that time, our county agents devoted about 1/3 of their time to 4-H work, to Boys and Girls Club work. And so our county ag agent, the county ag agent was would devote about 1/3 of their time. It was also, our 4-H youth were active in livestock, clothing, and home economics. The ag production expanded. You can see that expansion, you know, so it would make sense that they were involved in agriculture or in livestock production. I love this, the baby beef book. And then at that time, it was also found, you know, again, in the 1920s, what was happening during the 1920s. You know, we were having issues, you know, the Dust Bowl was happening, and they found that many kids were dangerously underweight. And so the education was focused on good nutrition for youth. I think that's really interesting too. 1920s, they were underweight. And then you look at the 2000 teens, and probably going into the 2020s, and we're you know, almost getting to the point where we're dangerously overweight. So back in 1920, we were focusing our nutrition programs on underweight youth. In 2020, we're going to be focusing our attention or our programming to overweight youth. During the 1930s, this is when the Depression was happening. Our home economics home demonstration agents, as they were called, stepped up those efforts to improve that nutrition to low-income families. So it was back then, we started working with low-income families, and this is where we really stepped up within 4-H to enhance our leadership and community service opportunities for young people. Our numbers were down at that time, but again, you're talking about the Depression era, and it makes sense that numbers would be down. But what would happen is our young people would take their animals and show them in California, sell them, and then bring that money back to their families. It was, so 4-H camp started being held in the late 1920s, early 1930s, I believe. It was held at a university farm south of Reno, later on campus in Mackey Field, which is the football stadium. That's where first 4-H camps were held. I love the fact that a third of the state's 4-H members attended, and they paid $2.50 to attend. So I think that is, shows we've been having that history. But it was in 1938 that the director or the assistant director started negotiating, mostly with the Rabe family, which were Douglas County property owners, and then with the Farm Bureau for the establishment of purchasing the land to establish our camp at Lake Tahoe. And so we started, and what happened was in 1938, the strip of land that's in yellow on this paper or on this screen became university property, and that is the current site, the permanent site of our 4-H camp at Lake Tahoe. It was in 1942 that we added the beachfront property, and that's where the Park family came involved, and they sold the land at a very nice rate. What happened was the land was sold to the Farm Bureau, and the Farm Bureau then gave the land to the university for that 4-H camp. And these are just some pictures of 4-H camp. You can see they used to sleep in tents, these tents, and many of our 4-H camp advisory board, state camp advisory board members talk about the tents and talk about the camp. In fact, I would not be surprised if this picture right here is not, it kind of looks like, I need to find out for sure, but it looks like some of our camp board members. We do have a state camp board that is an advisory board to that facility that is designated by state statute. So state law designates who serves on that board and what their purposes are. If you have not got to go to camp, I highly recommend that you try to make a trip to our camp at Lake Tahoe. I will tell you, we are the envy of the entire West. I know it. We have the best camp facility. We have one of the best camping facilities in the country. We just have to figure out how to market it better so it's used. So the first junior livestock show in 1939, the first Nevada Junior Livestock Show, was held here in Reno. That continues to happen every year, and it has been, it grows and grows and grows every year. I know we have young people from across the state that participate in that event. 4-H during World War II, Extension was named the official agency at this time for farmers and homemakers, and this is again where we started looking at those priorities towards their priorities started going towards national security. During this time, our 4-H clubs, like this one in Douglas County, joined. They brought in enough scrap iron to build 4 tanks for the armed forces. So they would go out and collect scrap iron and turn it in so that to help with the war efforts. That was their community service. You can see that this was a newsletter that was reported during wartime, and the Churchill County Happy Harmonizers collected materials and clubs prepared members to serve their country. So it gave them, this was some of the things that they did. And then also there was a Food for Freedom effort. The Victory Gardens or gardens increased by 50%, and most of the 4-H club projects were related to food production and conservation. Again, trying to help the war effort. It was the post-war era that we saw growth in our 4-H membership as well as our ag production. I love these cattle. I believe that they're steers. It looks like they're steers. This was probably a market steer. It could have been a market steer at that time, or it could have been a calf, but they are, the way things have changed. And good, I'm glad to hear. Yeah, we love camp. Yes. So we did post-war. There was an agronomist, Kirk Day, that served in Humboldt County from 1947 to 1976. He brought electricity to ranchers. He helped them to upgrade their irrigation systems and promote seed production, as well as promotion of vaccinating your animals. It was also, he started 4-H clubs in Paradise Valley, Winnemucca, McDermott, and Orvada. And I was looking at this going, because I used to have some relatives from Orvada. And I was like, I should double check and make sure that's none of my relatives. My family used to, a branch of the family used to have a ranch in Orvada. And my dad talks about, every time he drives through, he talks about coming down to McDermott and Orvada for the summer and spending the summer with them. But in the 1950s, this was the grand champion beef at the California Hereford Show, shown by Douglas County 4-H'er. Looks much, much different than our beef of today. And Farron Bunker served as the Las Vegas agent from 1958 to 1976. He was a former 4-H member, and so he saw the importance of developing youth programs in that community. And then in 1960, we had Gail Monk, who served in extension for 3 decades. For 30 years, and his emphasis was youth and agriculture programs. As you can see, most of our extension agents at this time, their focus was on youth, and then their area. In the 1970s, our membership continued to grow, and camp was that opportunity to develop leadership. This is a picture of the Western counties at 4-H camp. So in 1970, it looks like. So a lot of kids went to camp. And then in 1982, the Western Regional 4-H Leadership Conference occurred at the 4-H camp. And this was a great opportunity. This probably would have been teenagers coming in from across the West. And there was talk of trying to revise something like this again, but I think it's been shelved due mostly to budget cuts back 5 or so years ago. Again, this was a livestock specialist trying to help our youth and ranchers produce a higher quality product for consumers. Just like we started trying to teach our young people how to grow better corn and better and can in a safer way, we're still doing that today. Staying Alive, 4-H Staying Alive was an urban program started in Las Vegas for latchkey kids, and they had more than 3,500 youth that participated. It was really in the 1980s that latchkey kids was a term, and and I'm from that generation of a latchkey kid, and so Extension really worked on trying to create programs, especially in the urban areas, knowing that they're not going to be able to focus on agriculture in what our area. That's when we really started working with at-risk youth. It was Marilyn Smith and Jerry Lunsford. This is in the 1980s is when they began to reach out to youth at risk. And Marilyn Smith is still working for Nevada 4-H. She is a state specialist in Elko. And the next slide is actually in the 1980s, she developed the first Project Magic program in Elko in 1989, and that program still continues in many of our communities across the state, as well as Maryland still goes out to other states to do training on how to create a Project Magic program. It is for juvenile offenders. So it's, we have a pretty good history. In 1993, the University Board of Regents recognized cooperative extension as a separate college so at that time, cooperative extension became, so we have the College of Agriculture or Cabner, there's the College of Education, the College of Business, the College of Liberal Arts. In 1993, the College of Cooperative Extension was formed, or University of Nevada Cooperative Extension. So, which meant we got our own dean and etc. So in 1998, Karen Hinton was appointed Dean and Director of Cooperative Extension, and that's really when we began to operate as our own college. And so, again, we like to say that cooperative extension and 4-H is our gateway to the university. We always like to tell young people that 4-H is your first university class that you will take. And as we move into the 21st century, you can see after-school clubs in Washoe County help our young people. Washoe County still continues to have after-school clubs. We still have a lot of after-school programs in many of our communities. The club activities are very diverse. I love this picture. I had not seen this one, but this one happened in Las Vegas where they separate the DNA of an onion. They did a Field of Genes curriculum, and they had to separate the DNA of an onion. And so, doing science, that's also extended to the families. There's a lot of family education that happens, including parenting, anger management, literacy skills. And then our animal projects, we know they're alive and well. They're, still teaching our young people the skills that they need. And then something that I did not add in here that I need to is what just happened on Friday, actually, within Extension. On Friday afternoon, the Board of Regents again voted for a consolidation or merging of the College of Cooperative Extension or University of Nevada Cooperative Extension and the College of Agriculture, Biotechnology, and oh, cool, Jasmine, that's really cool. So we will be in the next 16 months, there will be some changes happening within Extension. We will be part of the College of Agriculture, Cabner. But just so you guys are aware, my goal has been through this entire process is not to affect you at the county level. So I don't foresee any changes happening for you at the county level. We're gonna go on with business as usual. So. And that's cool that Jasmine went to school with a couple of these kids. All right, so we remain vital in cooperative extension. We always laugh about 4-H and always saying that when budgets are tight, or when things happen at different institutions, different places, how we save extension is we start the 4-H call. And I know in Michigan, the governor wrote extension completely out of the state budget. And what happens there is if you don't have state funding, then you don't get federal funding, because it has to be a match. There has to be a 1-to-1 match. And so they did a concerted effort and let every 4-H'er know and let every 4-H family know. And finally the governor said, okay, call off the dogs. We're tired of everybody calling. Extension's been saved. So that happens once in a while. All right, any questions about the history of 4-H? Okay, I'm showing that we are getting close to time, so I want to share with you another PowerPoint. This is going to hopefully explain a little bit more about, I just wanted to give you the structure, or I wanted you to hear the history of 4-H, and so, because I think it's important as we move forward. But now we're going to talk about how 4-H is structured, because gets a little confusing, and I know as a new staff person, knowing who to call and when to call and everything. So 4-H, there are 4 components, well, 3 components really to 4-H. There's a 4th component. The national, the federal, the state, the county, and then foundations, or our private partner. The program is made possible through this cooperative effort. And so at the national level, 4-H is run by, and I'm actually going to go to the next one because I'm going to talk about each one of these individually. So at the federal level, or the national level, USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, is the overall group that runs extension, cooperative extension. At that level, they are the ones that administer the program. The U.S. Department, that is a congressionally approved, home for our organization. That is run by the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, which is a political appointment. So that appointment can change every 4 years or every 8 years. I am guessing that in January, or probably December, but will take effect in January, there will be a new Secretary of Agriculture. No idea who that will be at this point. Then there is NIFA, which is the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. If you ever heard of CSREES, the Cooperative System of Extension and Research, I can't remember now what it stands for. That sounds horrible, but it's been too many years. But NIFA is the agency underneath USDA. There is a administrator or a director of NIFA who does run that program. There are 6 units within NIFA. One of those units is the Institute of Youth, Family, and Community. There is an administrator over that. Under that is the Division of Youth and 4-H. And that's where 4-H National it's 4-H National Headquarters. I need to make that change in there. And the National 4-H Program Leader is Lisa Loxman. And so she runs 4-H National Headquarters. Within National 4-H or 4-H National Headquarters, there are program leaders that provide leadership both with policy and and programming. And so there's someone who does, who works with healthy living. There's someone who works with citizenship and professional development and volunteer development. There's somebody that works with curriculum, policy. That person deals with the Clover, any age restrictions that we have, like Clover buds, a lot of those policies. And then we have someone that does 4-H science. There's also an evaluation person. And I normally have that list of names for everybody, but that has changed recently, and I didn't have time to look it up. I apologize. But just know that there are people. So for my position, I then answer to 4-H National Headquarters. And I'll let you know, like this morning, I had a question regarding if we have a federal MOU or a federal, if we're working with another organization, another youth organization. So what I did is I just went right to Lisa and said, do we have a formal partnership at the federal level with this other organization? And she got back to me on that answer. And so those are the types of things that I may go, or I had a phone call, this was when I was in Idaho, but I had a phone call one time from a gentleman he had a 7-year-old daughter, and we all know that 7-year-olds are not old enough for competitive 4-H. Hopefully we all know that 7-year-olds are not eligible for competitive 4-H. They are considered Clover buds. Well, he wanted his daughter to show her horse and her steer at the county fair, and he was denied that entry. Well, he called he was telling me that he knew how to get federal rules changed, and that he would just call USDA and get that rule changed. And I said, fantastic, here's the name and the phone number of the person that you need to call. Because he didn't like the answer he didn't like the answer he got at the county level. So he did what everybody does when they don't like that answer. They call the state. He didn't like the answer I gave him, so he was going to call the federal level. I did give a heads up to the person at the federal level and said, you might get this crazy man that calls you. There's a whole lot else to the story, but he was crazy. But anyway, so he did, I don't know if he ever did follow up. Also, if there is an issue with the name and emblem with the Clover, or the use of the 4-H 4-H youth development or 4-H club, then that actually can go to USDA. I have had businesses and organizations or different groups turned into USDA for misappropriating or misusing the name and emblem. We had a meatpacking plant one time that was advertising that they bought 4-H animals and come support my business for not because we anyway, and there are rules against that, and we'll talk about that, like I said, in 2 weeks. But so they deal with a lot of those types of issues. At the state level, we do have the land-grant university, and our land-grant university is essentially our state partner. We do also work with the state legislature, which is where our funding from the state comes from. And so every 2 years we have to go before the state legislature for funding allocations. And so we do have, the land-grant university we know has many colleges, and that is administered by our university president, Mark Johnson. And say what you will about President Johnson, he's been good and bad, but right now he's been very positive about 4-H. He's been, every time I see him, he comes up and talks to me about the 4-H program and what are we doing and lots of things. So I think it's, I'm trying to stay in his good graces, and I'm really trying to be a positive partner with him. We also have, and this is where we've got our College of Agriculture, Biotechnology, and Natural Resources. We have a dean of that college, and that is Bill Payne. He will ultimately be the boss, but we will have a director of extension and associate dean for engagement, but that director of extension currently is Mark Walker. Mark, we will be in the process very shortly of doing a national search for a new dean or a new associate dean and director of extension. And so just so you know that that person will be changing. That is the, that person has the financial, they have the bottom line say on budgets, they have the bottom line say on a lot of things, and that is who I report to. Then we have, and then under that, we do have 2 area directors. Frank Flavin is in the northern area, and he will be retiring in about February. So they are doing an active search for his replacement. And then we have Eric Killian in the south, and Eric is not going to retire for a while. I may have to hurt him if he even thinks about trying to retire. But just so you know, as a county 4-H, just to kind of know the hierarchy, as a county 4-H professional, what you need to do is first go to your extension educator if you have one. Not everybody has one, but go to them and talk through the problem, see if you can work out an issue locally. And then if you cannot, then you need to contact Eric or Frank and try to work through the system that way. And then Eric and Frank know when to get me involved if you have a problem. You can always call and ask for advice from me. I'm always willing to, and then I will also say, okay, this is the point you need to get a hold of, Eric or Frank and get them involved in it. Especially if it comes to releasing a volunteer from their duties, which, we can fire volunteers very easily. Nevada makes it super simple, and that would be, Eric and Frank would be the first line, and then they will keep me involved in those decisions. But, and then, sorry, I moved one. And then we also have our 4-H program under the, under cooperative extension. And so there is a state 4-H office. Currently, that state 4-H office is me, myself, and I, as the state 4-H program director. I'm really, really hoping that we will be able to increase the number of staff, and so that there will be more programs that we can do within our state. But right now it's me, and I am housed with the dean in his office. He is still currently, I believe, the dean or the director of extension. I'm housed in his office. And then we have our county extension educators and our program coordinators, community-based assistants. Who does a community partner send a request for the use of the 4-H emblem? If they're not going to be for the 4-H name and emblem, and this would be something, Tricia, that we'll talk about in a couple weeks, but just to answer your question now, if they're not going to be crossing county lines, then they would do that request to use the name and emblem with the county office. And they would be, and so whoever in your office, I'm guessing in your office, Tricia, it would be Eric, would give that final permission until you are able to get the educator or the faculty member there. If it goes beyond a county border, then you would request that from me, and I would give them that permission. And then if it goes beyond the state borders, which happens quite a bit, then we would have to do that request to USDA or to 4-H National Headquarters. All right. And then at the county level, we have many partners, but one of our biggest partners is our county commissioners. That is where we get our county funding from, except for in Stormy's case. She doesn't have a county partner. Her partner just goes directly to the state, and because of Nye County choosing to defund extension at the county level. But we do get our county funding from the commissioners. So they are the ones that typically will provide office space, an operating budget, so travel money, those, and where you can buy paper and pencils and make copies and all of those pieces. Our county extension educators are responsible. They are ultimately responsible for that county 4-H program. Most of them have designated that to you as the 4-H professional, but they are ones that you need to, and they're the ones who work with the area directors and the county commissioners as well. You may be asked from time to time to go do a presentation to the county commissioners about what's happening in 4-H. If you're not, then you need to either ask your county extension educator. You need to ask them, hey, either can you give them what's currently happening in 4-H, or can I go in and tell them what's happening? I think that's a really important partnership to have. And then our 4-H professionals, those are you guys. I call, because we have all kinds of names, a coordinator, a community-based instructor, a program manager, we've got program assistants. So when I say 4-H professional, I mean all of you, because to me, you're all the same. You're all on the ground working with the 4-H program. You may be working with volunteers, with parents, with youth, in schools, with other community organizations. And Molly, I will get to your question in just one second. But you are the ones that are delivering the program. And so you're probably the key partner. Molly asked a question of how often should we update county commissioners? That's really up to you and the county commissioners and your county extension educator. When I was in the county, I would update them once a year, maybe twice a year. Some counties do 4 times a year. It just all depends. I would say once a year would be the best, would be the minimum that you should update them. And it's always good if you've got like a great program going on, invite those county commissioners to your program to see, in action what's happening. Invite them to achievement night, invite them to those different events so they can see they can see the young people. Our other partner is our volunteer leaders. We could not do this program without our volunteers. And so they are, they're our club leaders, our program leaders, camp counselors. And again, we need to make sure that they are well trained and that they, and that they're delivering our programs. And then our private partners are what we consider foundations. At the federal level, we do have our national partner, National 4-H Council. So they are the ones who own the National 4-H Center in Washington, D.C. That is where their headquarters are. There are a variety of individuals on that. Jennifer Sarangelo is currently the CEO or the head of National 4-H Council, and we work with a lot of this group. They are the ones going out and getting the big dollars for grants and for programs. Curriculum. If there's a curriculum that wants to be developed, that somebody wants to develop, then they will go out and try to find funding to help with that curriculum. They find a lot of funding for STEM programs, mentoring programs, etc. They are also the ones who are, you've seen the 4-H Grows Here campaign with the logo, the 4-H Grows Here. They're the ones that are leading that effort in the branding and the marketing of 4-H across the nation. So they've got staff hired. Actually, we do have somebody on the regional level that will be helping us with marketing. So you can see, that's one partner. Then at the state level, we don't currently within 4-H really have a good handle on what's on fundraising or development. We do have a state endowment account where that is money that, if we get money that's donated to 4-H at the state level, it goes into our endowment account, and then we can use that for various programming. I know, we've used it for maybe just help support our young people going to national contests, livestock, horse, those types of things. Or if we want to, we can use it to support our youth going to national conferences, so National 4-H Conference, Congress, some of those. Or if we wanted to do a statewide event, we could use those dollars for that. We also partner very closely with our Development and Alumni Relations Office here on the UNR campus. We do have a person that is housed in Las Vegas that is, she has about a 25% appointment to extension to help with development, with not fundraising, but finding money. And so I work very closely with Wendy, trying to find funding for the different programs I know, and then also working with them on grants, etc. Sometimes they have funding that comes through that would be perfect for us, and so I work with them, and they also work with us with donors and how we participate, or how we interact with donors. That's one of my goals, but to really create a statewide effort. But right now we're just not there. We have a lot of other things that are important. Okay. Any questions about kind of that organizational structure? And I'm going to, when I send you the PowerPoints, I'm also, just so you know, there are notes in these PowerPoints. Ooh, and I'm going over time, Crumb. Sorry, you guys, I'm trying. If you can just stick with me just really quick, I'm gonna share one more PowerPoint with you, and we won't go over again, I promise. But I wanna share this one last PowerPoint, kind of the, what is Nevada 4-H? So, this is one, some of you from the South may have already seen this, but that's okay, you're gonna see it again. But I just wanted to share with you what Nevada 4-H looks like, and kind of our structure a little bit. So the statement of purpose: we are an age-appropriate, positive youth development program that helps shape future leaders and innovators through research-driven, hands-on learning activities with a focus on academic and career readiness. That is our mission that was created before I came here, and I think it's a very, very good mission. So you can see in 2014, these are our enrollment numbers. We had roughly 52,000 youth that were involved in 4-H. When you pull out the kids that we reached in multiple delivery modes, it was about 44,000 youth. An even split on gender. Grades, our highest group is our Clover Buds and our juniors. We really drop off when it comes to our senior division, and so trying to figure out, that's one of the things that we need to figure out, how to keep our senior division kids, our older youth, in. Is this club? This is everything. This would be all enrolled. This is club and group enrollments. The next one, I do have, I believe, yes, we're going to talk about, I have it broke down by delivery mode. But you can see our largest, we've got double, almost triple the number of youth that are involved, that live in urban settings, that live in rural settings in Nevada, that are involved overall. We have, fairly even split, Latino versus non-Latino, and you can see the racial breakdown. And then our volunteers, we have about 3,300 volunteers in 4-H. 2,500 of those are adults, and then 900 are youth. So those might be teenagers that are helping out. And then this is where we're broke down by delivery mode. So in 4-H, and we're going to talk about this in one of the sessions, but in 4-H we have a variety of delivery modes. We have the club model, where they meet and have their officers and etc. We have short-term and special interests. Those might be shorter, maybe an educational program that you're going and doing for a couple of hours at an event, like a fall festival, and you're doing activities with kids. Or it could be camp. So this is our overnight and our day camp. And again, I want to stress to everybody that this is where they should be reported, not in your club numbers, but if you have overnight and day camps. School enrichment, this is if you go into a school and do a program. where you're just going in and teaching the program, or if you have a teacher that uses our curriculum and they're using it in their classroom, you need to get those numbers from those teachers. And in that way, because it is using, they're essentially serving as a pseudo volunteer for us. We also have individual member and study, and then after school programs. So you can see the breakdown. I can tell you, number one, our camp numbers are not correct because we had a lot of campers that were reported under club enrollments and not camp. And so to try to break that out is pretty tough. School enrichment, you can see the difference, and I know why there's a difference. And we're good on those numbers. But my goal in the next 5 years is to get that 52,000. I want to see that up to 60,000 within 5 years. And then I also would like to see, within 10 years, I'd like to see it up to 65,000. So basically double, or increasing our numbers by about 10,000 youth in 10 years. So that's, increasing 1,000 youth a year, and then maintaining those 1,000 youth. I'd really like to see our club numbers increase up to, I'd love to see them up closer to 10,000. But one of the things that we have to think about there is we need to look at clubs differently. They may not look the same as they did in 1902 or even the way they looked in, 2000. So we have to think about that too. Our current structure, again, we have our UNCE Associate Dean and Director. He is the supervisor for both myself and then our area directors. The area directors and myself, we try to meet at least once a month, the three of us, to talk about 4-H issues, if things are coming up. So that way I know what's happening and they know what's coming down, what I need help with, etc. I do supervise the 4-H camp director. The area directors are the supervisors for the county educators, as well as the state or area specialists, and then those extension educators are supervising community instructors, except for one. Well, there's two exceptions in the state, and that's Nye County, where so Stormy and Carol, I actually am their immediate supervisor with the change in their structure in their county. Just to quickly give you roles and responsibilities. So the dean and director, they're responsible for assuring that our programs align with the current and future university goals. My job is to provide leadership for the program related to program coherence, expansion, marketing, evaluation, and professional development. So my job is to make sure that, we have some statewide programs that we're doing across the state. So things like STEM, the National Youth Science Day, that's one of the things that I see us being able to do very well as a statewide, it's a program that we can do. Also, I'm always going out and talking to new audiences. I have a meeting next week with Ag in the Classroom about a new curriculum that they're creating, working with them to create this new curriculum, and it's something, it's an expansion of what we could do. Always marketing the program, evaluating our program, and then also professional development. And then again, we're responsible, the two of us together are responsible for marketing our programs within the nation, state, and within the university. So, I'm always going to meetings with other departments on campus as well. And then our area directors, they're responsible for supporting those teaching activities, working with the 4-H professionals for all of these pieces as well. And our educators, you can see what their responsibilities are. And then you can see what, this was all put together by a committee before I came of what these responsibilities are. And I really like how it lines it out. And then you each have your own position descriptions or your own job descriptions as well, but this gives you an overall. And then what we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others remains immortal. And I think that is, I love that, just as we are moving forward, I think it's really important that we remember that quote. So, all right. And I apologize, I went over. I really try not to do that. But does anybody have any additional questions, comments, thoughts? And I'm just making notes of who all was on today, so I make sure. I am going to get this, I will be putting this on the YouTube site, and I will be getting the PowerPoints. I've got to figure out how I'm going to share the PowerPoints, because I'd like to share them with more than just this group, but I'm not sure who all. When do you think we'll be changing the club structure? You know, and actually we're not going to really be changing the club structure. There's still 5 things that make a club. As far as, you know, they need to have a certain number of meetings. They need to have some kind of officer or some kind of youth-led leadership structure. There needs to be 5 members from at least 3 different families. And I don't remember the others, but what that looks, you know, we can adapt that. And so for, you know, like Karen's asking, when are we changing the club structure? What we need to do is look at what are some potential clubs that we could be doing, in Vegas for a club. You know, they may be meeting at different times, or it just looks a little differently. So we just need to be talking about how that can look. Molly asked a question, are youth allowed to be leaders of clover beds, or help be leaders of clover beds? So typically, it's great to have those older youth be, they can help with the leadership, the leadership of the clover beds. You need to have a certified, an adult 21 or older or 18 or older, I can't remember. Anyway, you need to have a adult who has gone through the certification. They've had their background check. They've gone through the application process. They need to be present at the same time. The team leaders can be leading the group, but you need to have that adult in the room. That is the critical point. We cannot leave, you know, there needs to be that responsible adult. But teens are great to work with clover buds. And so you cannot fingerprint, if they're under 18, you're not going to be able to fingerprint them. So that's why I say you need to have that adult volunteer in the room with them. They don't need to, if they're just a youth leader, then they don't need to go through that same process. They just need to be designated as a youth leader. Karen asked a question, are club numbers more important than groups? To me, they're equally as important. It just depends on what, that's, you know, what your focus is in your county. You know, in your guys' case, they're going to be equally as important. You know, you're probably, depending on, and if we change what the club looks like in Clark County, then, you know, and it may look the same for, I'm thinking Roadrunners, it may not change. You know, they may keep the traditional club structure, but you may have another group that is going to look differently, and that's okay. That's fine. And so we just have to, you know, we need to just, it sounds funny. I mean, I'm not really answering it, but it just depends. We just have to look at that. And can staff be leaders? So that is a question that comes up all the time. That is a tough one. There are times as staff we need to be at club meetings because they may not have a certified, you know, we've got a volunteer that's going through certification and they may not be completely certified, but the kids want to get started, and so you may be there. But it's kind of a personal philosophy. My personal philosophy was I didn't feel like I could be a 4-H volunteer if I am the one setting the policy for the program in my county. The same as I have a hard time now being a 4-H volunteer as I'm helping to set policies and enforcing those policies for the state, Because what if something happens, within my own club, and I have, it's really a personal philosophy. I don't recommend it. Many states do not allow it. We do not currently have anything, yes or no, for or against it in writing. It's always been said, my understanding is it's always been said that staff should not also be 4-H volunteers within a club, but I cannot find that anywhere in writing. So again, it's a personal philosophy. It's a tough one. Now granted, there's a difference, like if you have a teen council, or if you've got a group of teens, yes, you can serve as the advisor for that group. There's nothing wrong with that. I did that, but to actually do a project, that stuff, so an example, I had a county I worked with an educator in Michigan. She prided herself, she was the 4-H agent. So she was like an extension educator in charge of the 4-H program, and she prided herself that she had the largest 4-H club. She was the organizational leader of the largest 4-H club in the state, or in the county. And I thought, I really kind of have a hard time with that, because she's the one in charge of the whole 4-H program. So how is she going to do, that was me. Again, that was just me. So you guys can take it as you want it, but I don't recommend it. Okay, any other questions? And I lost somebody that was on earlier. Oh, Jay. Okay, I've got it. Okay. Any other, and please, please, please feel free to contact me anytime you have questions that come up about this stuff. Any of this, I will do my best to help you. Just to remind you, on September 27th, we're going to have the second session of this, and it is under its use of the name of 4-H name and emblem, the managing risk, and then talking about 4-H essential elements. And Karen, we just wondered sometimes getting started if it's okay to charter under staff. Okay, and yes, if you don't have a volunteer but you want to get a program started, then yes, you could do that. Especially if it's like an after school or that kind of thing. But the goal is to eventually find a volunteer that would take that program, take that club over. Hopefully that answered your question. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you. And again, you guys, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to take you over time. The rest of them will be right at an hour and a half. So if there are no more questions, then